Hello everyone, once again thank you so much for joining us. So in today's section we'll be learning about Terraform Workspace. So first of all we'll try to understand why we are using Terraform Workspace, in what scenario and when to use it, right? So first of all we need to understand what is Terraform Workspace. So Terraform Workspace is nothing but, say for example, if you want to deploy your infrastructure, let's say you're writing Terraform code, you want to deploy to the certain environment, let's say dev environment or maybe staging or maybe production environment, right? So if you want to deploy to the multiple environment, how are you going to manage your infrastructure, right? There is something called as a state file. So how we can manage a state file when we use a different workspace, that also we'll just try to understand. So before that, as I told you, I'm going to basically let me take you there. So workspace, as I told you, whenever you want to deploy your resource and manage your state into multiple locations or regions, not region, basically the environment, we can have a Terraform workspace created. By default, let's say I have here, let me write here Terraform. Let's say you have a Terraform code here, right? Yeah, you have a Terraform code. This Terraform code, let's say about your this is, let's say this is a virtual machine VM. I have in the VM what I have normally code level. I would have main.tf, right? Main.tf file, then variables dot tf. Then what else I can have output. These three things are very much outputs, right? Dot tf. So these three things are there. Now, as I told you, this is your the infrastructure. That means this is basically your Terraform code, right? This is your Terraform code. Now, question is where are we going to deploy this one, right? So this is where normally whenever you create the resource, any resource in Terraform, by default, workspace, that is a Terraform workspace, is going to create. Let's say this workspace by default, as I told you, whenever you want to provision any resource, by default, there will be a default namespace will be created. Sorry, Terraform like a workspace will be created for you. That is called as default, default. Okay, yeah, default. Okay, default. This is a namespace name. Sorry, a workspace name. Okay, so now let's say, but question is if I have a three environment now, let's say I have here environment one, that is a dev. Second, okay, dev. Second I have, let's say, staging, STG or staging, whatever, right? Staging. Third, I have a productions or prod. These all what? These are all called as an environment. Now, as I told you, our requirement is we have a Terraform core. Now, by default, whenever you want to, basically you are creating any resource, by default names workspace for your resource Terraform. By default, Terraform would create a default workspace called as default name. Now, let's say I want to deploy the resource, same resource to the here. Now, if I have to deploy here, right? If you want to deploy here, then whenever you deploy the resource, there is something called as a state file get created, right? st state file, Terraform state file, basically. Okay, same thing and for others also. Now, by default, what happens if you want to deploy the resource into if you're using the, I'm saying if you're using the default namespace, sorry, workspace, what happens is by default Terraform would basically create your and deploy resources in dev environment. That is good. But then here one problem here, what we are seeing here is that the state file, your state file for your dev related will be stored here itself within the here within your workspace, right? Within here you have a tf state or tf state, right? tf state, basically Terraform state file. Okay, Terraform state file will be created, stored based on this namespace. But we are deploying to the where um, dev environment. Same way, I want if I use the same default one, whenever I want to deploy the same resource into the development, that sorry, staging environment, right? This time also the state file also will be created again in the same default namespace. It will basically update. That means same thing if I use another namespace with different, this state file also all store into one default namespace. So if you can think now that if we had to manage all different environment, that is quite difficult for you right now, because as I told you, for developments, for staging, for production, all you are using only one in particular one state file means it is quite complex for you to basically monitor as well as to basically manage your infrastructure, right? Because it is managed in one names workspace. Basically your state file will be only one, it's only, right? So this is quite difficult to manage it. So what we can do instead of this one, we can have a separate namespace, sorry, workspace. I'm confusing always because there is a Kubernetes concept called the namespace, so bear with me. Okay, so workspace. So what you can do here in this case, you can create a separate workspace for the dev environment. Same for the staging. You can, let's say in my case, let's say I can give namespace workspace for the dev. I can give as a just dev, so that will be easy to understand. Same thing for the staging. I can give a as staging or stg, whatever is there. Staging. Same thing for production workspace. Name I can give as prod for simplicity purpose. That means now whenever I try to create the same resource, I will not use the default one. I will not be using this default. Instead, what I will do, you can use based in the environment. Let's say I want to deploy the infrastructure into the developments or maybe dev environment. What I can do is that instead of here, you can directly, what you can do first thing, you can, let's say I want to deploy this thing, we can directly switch this particular to the dev environment. That means you have to switch to this particular workspace. Okay, just like how to switch means just like in git we are using a git checkout, then we can then branch name, right? Similar way here also we have something called as a Terraform workspace select option and name of the uh, workspace name. That way we can also create and switch it. Okay, so now what happened, now once you switch to this particular basically workspace, now you can deploy your resources independently. That means for, as I told you, now for this particular dev namespace workspace, I mean, you will basically be storing all the information that your state file will be stored in this particular namespace only, it will be stored. Same way, if you want to deploy another say for example infrastructure, it could be any other infrastructure, right? Not just a VM, it could be storage, it could be MySQL, Mongo, whatever it is, right? Or Kubernetes, anything. If you want to deploy to the, let's say another environment called as staging, then you have already created the workspace called staging. You have to switch to the staging environment, then you can use it. Now what is the advantage we see here is that the state management, because here mean we are managing all the state file, that means all different environment state file into one state file. That will be a huge, and it is the biggest risk. Something happened to the state file, then you are gone. So you should be very much careful while doing it. So this is the reason why we are basically trying to use a multiple workspace, so that we can use it based on the like environment, right? That is the first thing. Second example, I would say why we are using the multiple workspaces, because some people, as a same concept, but again, if you want to based on the environment, they want to have a, or they want to manage separate state file, right? Because as I told you, you don't want to manage everything in one state file as a default namespace, sorry, workspace. You want to manage all the infrastructure state file based on the names environment. So in these situations, we can use this concept, that is your workspace. Okay. Now let us see how we can do that. Okay. So that means I have to create, depends on this thing. But having said that, carefully just understand one thing. It does not mean that same VM you will be creating here. You will have to basically modify, right, based on the changes also here. Let's say main.tf, whatever you have, while passing the value, like whatever value you have, normally you will have a module, right? So you will modify in the module. Normally we'll use all modules only. So in your tfvars file, not for, let's say, for dev environment, we'll have a one separate dev. Let's say I can mention, let's say tfvars data structure remains same. Let me give a small, brief about the structure of the resource also here, so that it'll be much clear for you. This you're clear, right? Now let's say I want to provision the VM. Normally, as I told you, you will not just create one VM. It could be you have n number of resources will be created, or you will be creating, right? So, but how the structure should be this thing? Let's say you have a repo here. Let's say I'm having a repo here, right? Let's say this is a Azure repo, let's say, right? As a repo, you have Azure repo. So in Azure repo, we would have this thing, right? Basically your code. It could be your GitHub as well. So now how the structure works. Now, as I told you, one way we can use this using namespace, but if you're actually thinking in the real time base, okay. So as I told you, these three things are important: main.tf, variables.tf, and outputs.tf. So now let's talk about the high level. Now, as I told you, therefore I will have a module here, folder, modules. Modules. Modules is nothing but it is your directory. Okay, this will be a directory, or you can call as a folder in Windows based. Okay, so directory call as a modules. Under modules only, you have a name of this module resource. Let's say I want to work with the BMs. You will have a again one more BMs or maybe virtual machines as a module name. Let's say BM also, this also folder. That means first I'll have a modules. Under modules I'll have a name of the resource. In my case it's a BM resource I want to create, right? So I have separate folder or maybe directory called as the modules, sorry, BM or maybe virtual machines. Under here only I will have these configurations, BM related, let's say main.tf, output.tf. Same way, if I have one more resource, let me give an example, networking, right? Network related, and the same module folder or directory, I will have a, let's say, network. This also a directory, or you can call as a folder. Inside here, then only you will have again network related configurations. Same thing we will have a like main.tf, output.tf, variable.tf, you will be having under here also. Same way, let me give one more thing, so that as I told you, within the same modules folder, I will have one more folder called as, let's say this time I can mention as the backup, right? I'm just giving the some example. Let's say backup is a folder name. Under here, basic under this backup, I will have again same like here, main.tf, variable.tf, output.tf, I'll be having it. You can like this. That means if you have a multiple resources, for each resource would have their own module. Okay. Now here within the module folders or directory, I would also be having something called as main dot, right, main.tf file. Then same thing, variables .tf. Okay, then okay, and then next you have output file writing. Okay, .tf file. So this will be having, along with you would also be having some this thing, providers dot tf. So these are minimum required at least in your module level. Now whatever you see here, main.tf, variable.tf, this is known, all we can call as root module. Okay, let's say you can call a root module main.tf, we can call as a root module variable.tf file or variables we can call, or maybe on the root module we can call as output.tf and so on. Similar way, inside modules folder or directory, we have a folder that is a like network, let's say virtual machines or VM, and then backup, right? This all within that, whatever you have main.tf would be having, right? This is all each module, let's say network, backups, and VMs module. This is individually you can call as together they can call as a child module, whether you are referring child module of the network or child module of backup or child module of virtual machines and so forth. Okay, that's how it is. Now let's come to the points. Coming to the deployment of this particular state file, I mean not state file, the environment. So along with here, one thing if you notice, as I told you, variables I will simply pass the data types, but I do not actually pass the actual value in my inside module, right? That is a child module. I do not pass the actual value. Let's say BM name is equal to whatever BM name, I will not pass here. So where can I pass the actual value? Not just the BM, it could be any other resource information. Let's say backup related. I will simply mention the data type, that's it. But I will not pass the actual value. Then where do we need to normally pass it? So it has to be passed in your, there is a something called within the same modules, in the same module folder, you have one more folder. It can be any name. Okay, it can be any name. Let's say we can mention in this case, you can basically have a different kind of structure. It depends on the company to company, it may varies, but I would give a high level so that you can understand. This is basically, I can say, for example, I can give a folder within the same module. I can give a folder name as a maybe environment, environment, right? Environment. Under environment folder, I can have a multiple, let's say tab. And the same environment, I can have a, what else? Um, staging, right? I can have a staging here, staging. Same thing under same environment, I can have this thing, what it call prod. That means this is the environment I have given the high level. It can be any other structure. They can define anyways. But our motto is to basically pass the value, because as I told you, value will not be passing here. You will simply define the data type, but an actual value will be passing where? If you remember that day I told you, you will be passing something called as, in the simplest way, you can call as, let's say Terraform dot dev. It should be small letter. Not, this should be all small letter. Okay. I can give anything. It will be dev dot Terraform dot then tf. Okay. tf bars. This is the name I'll be using it. Where I'll be using it? If are working with the environment, other environment, because this is why I have given the name as an environment, so that it will be easy for us to understand. In environment, we have, as I told you, we have three environment: development, staging, and the production side. So within the environment folder, I will have something folder called as a dev. Inside dev folder only, I will be storing this dev .tf state. That means now for the dev related whatever changes I want to define, because as I told you, same variable will be defined here also in your root modules variables, but then actual value will be passing for each environment. That means if I talk about the this particular environment, that is your dev environment. This is why I mentioned Terraform dot Terraform dot dev dot tfvars. Okay, this is a name. So here I will, whatever value I'm passing the BM name, I will be updating. This is only for the dev related. Okay, this is only for dev related. Same way, if I want to deploy to the let's say staging mean, I will have again another tfvars file, right? Terraform dot let's say staging or stg, whatever name you can give. This naming is your based on your convenience. Okay, dot tfvars file. tfvars file. Same thing for the production mean, and the productions environments, that is your this is a name report folder. you can give a same like that. Terraform dot prod. Okay, sorry. Dot tf verse. That means you are clear right now how it is used. That means now instead of this thing, now what I'm doing basically the actual code basically, right? You, as I told you, the whatever value is there here, I will have only the value, but there while passing the value for based in the environment, I have to deploy here. Let's say now if I want to deploy this particular VMs or maybe any other resources from into the this particular this thing dep environment, I can simply choose this particular variable dot tf, I mean this variable tfvars file. Same thing if you want to deploy here, I can use the staging, and for prod I can choose this. That means this is based on the environment specific I can define. This is how I should be defining. Okay, now this way we can do it. And then as I told you, this state file now, what happens now, as I told you, for if you want to deploy this state file, right? Sorry, if you want to basically manage this state file, we have a this we have changed everything. Now if you want to manage separate state file, we can go with this concept like Terraform Workspace. Sorry, Terraform, yeah, Workspace. That means you can manage individually. Now also if you see here also we can manage individually. But what I'm trying to make you understand here is that we can go with this one. Otherwise, we can go with the environment in your TFVers file. Both your choices up to you. You can go with here this concept, that is TFVers you can define under environment, you can define in your Terraform folder. I mean in your repository, and you can structure in. It should not be the same structure. It can be anyways. But then how you want to manage your state TFVers, that is depends on your choice, maybe based on the environment or any other way that you can plan that accordingly. Okay, this way. But this way also I can use it. But this way if I use, what happens now, this can be used where if you're working with a let's say you have enterprise so kind of solution, that means you have a so much big code, right? You will not normally be creating or managing separate namespace. So that is why they have a separate environment variable they have defined. Based on that, the state file will be managed. Let's say for the dev they have separate state file will be managed here. Same thing for staging would have managed separate state file related, and the same way for the production. But here means if you're working with a small company, not much into this thing, this also possibly if you want to manage the state file separately instead of creating like this folder, then you can go with this concept, right? But it is still important for you to understand. This is the reason why I'm trying to differentiate between real time, how it should be used, and in the company also whether this can be possible, right? So even the interview also, they may ask the questions, are you going to deploy your resource into multiple environment? So you have to talk about the workspace concept. Okay, now let me show you in the real time. Now you have might be understood, you might be clear now, right? So I can go with this concept or this concept. Now let me go, as I told you, we are focusing on the workspace base. Let us show you. Now if you see the high level, Terraform starts with a single workspace name default. As I told you, by default Terraform would create different namespace, and commons use for multiple workspace is to create a parallel distinct copy of set of infrastructure in order to test a set of changes before modifying the main production infrastructure. So as simple, right? You creating separate branch, just like in GitHub we create separate branch, no? Like that, we also have a separate workspace we can create it. Now, this workspace is special both because it is the default and also because it cannot be deleted. Default, that means we cannot delete it. And for example, a developer working on the complex set of infrastructure changes might create a new temporary workspace in order to freely experiment with changes before affecting the default workspace. So I hope it is clear now, right? So that means just like a Git, how we create separate brands, tested out everything, then only we are switching back to this thing. That way, this is also possible. And by default, we are working on a default workspace. So as I mentioned, this is the default one. Then Terraform will not recommend using Workspace for larger infrastructure in line with environment patterns like dev queue staging. Recommended to use separate configuration directory, right? That means it is very clear now. It is asking Terraform does not recommend you to use it in your real time if you're working have so much of complex infrastructures, right? In this case, you will not be using a namespace workspace. So rather, what you do, as I mentioned, recommended to use the separate configuration directory. This is what I was explaining you. Configuration directory means, as I told you, you stop using this concept because this all instead of default, I can have a separate style, I can manage it. But this is not the biggest company, maybe so much of complex configurations you have it, or maybe enterprise level architecture or anything. We should not be using it, this one. So rather, what we can do is we can have a module. Under module, we can have a concept. Normally, we use module only for every single resource. So we can have a, it can be any other structure. I'm just giving one example. Let's say I want to manage based on the environment mean I can define something like an environment as a directory name. Within the environment, I can have another, this also directory called as a dev. This is for the dev, that means as name suggests, right? This is only mean for the development related Terraform code. Same this thing. But one thing notice here, you will, if you're trying to basically here, you are actually development related properties, that is your whatever you are defining here, right? Your whatever data you're passing here, let's say in variable data you're passing for your specific resource, the actual value will be passed to specific environment base. That means if I want to deploy to the development, I have to use that like this. For productions, I can use a production like this. It should be or structure like this. But then your actual code will be only one time. Don't be confused that if I had to create into the development, I should copy paste the same thing. No, this code remains as it is. You will not do changes. Only changes you are doing if you want to deploy to the respective environment, you will be changing only the TFVers file based on your requirement. Because here means I will not have the actual value, but then I'm passing the value based on the data type. Basically not passing the value, I'm saying I'm defining the data type so that I can define in my TFVers file. So this is what, if you remember, I was in fact shown you also, right? This one I'm trying to define. So for example, this is a, that's a one repository. This is a module folder. You can see, right? Main.tf, output.tf. I didn't mention here, but it should be mentioned if you want. But the second optional, it depends on your requirement. It can be a record, and then you can also define the providers. That is something required, and the variables. These three important. Even the output also. And this is a thing. Now, if you go one of the example, let me take your storage account. If you go to the variables, before that, if you see the what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to create the storage account. I'm passing using the map, that is forest. So let's not focus about what is written here, but let's focus about how we are passing, right? So if you see the output, sorry, variables, if you talk about the storage account, see, I have mentioned as a map of object. The reason why I'm using map of object, as I told you, whenever you are using the forest meta argument, we can use in two scenario. One is a map or set of strings. If you have a this kind of requirement, we can use it. Question is, what is map of string? Sorry, map, that also we need to understand. But for now, understand the data type we given as a map of object, and for name is a storage account name I had defined as a string, tier I have mentioned as a string, and so forth. Now container also is a list of object, right? Same thing I have, but if you notice here, I have not passed it any value here. This is within what storage account. Same thing for the others detail. If you want to see, let's say tag, right? Tag I gave a map of string. As I told you, we want to map with the multiple strings, right? So if you remember that day I shown you, right? This one. So map, we can also map of strings here. Now, only in these two scenario, basically we can go with the um, map if you want to use a forest. This is the reason why if you go here, you would see the I'm using the forest so that I can iterate them. But question is, what if I have a different requirements? If you have a different requirement, you should not be using it map of, let's say you cannot use a map of object. map of object you cannot use here as a data type. So instead of this one, you can just use an object. So object is nothing but it's just a one single attributes. That means one single properties, right? It can have a, say for example, I have a name called Hriyen, right? For my related information can only be passed within one object. So it can have a multiple values, basically information there. Let's say I can have my contact number, my address, my everything I can have it, my job description, everything I can have it. But that will be for specific person, right? Similar to way, if you want to have a different properties for different person or different storage account, then yes, you can have this kind of this thing. But while passing it, as I told you, for each you need to you have to use it. Let's not focus much into here what is written, but focus on the variable part. So as I told you, you would not, if you see everything, whatever you are basically see right here, these all are basically defined as a data type. I have defined it. Let's say what is name is nothing but string. That's it. I did not define the actual value, but as I told you, we do not define. But here, if you go, there is something called as a dev dot or to bar. It can be any name you can give it. As I told you, you can give as a terraform dot dev dot some name you can give it. So now, if you see here, environment related, I'm passing the actual value. But then you should know how these syntax are used. Whenever you are using the map, I have to use the curly braces. Remember this one. Once again, I'll repeat. Whenever you are using an object, you have to always use the curly braces or even the map of object. That means if I'm saying this is in your TFVers file, if you're using a map of object or object, you have to use curly braces, this one, so that I can pass, let's say environment name is a dev and what is a type, you can mention if you want, and what is a region, like this. If you see here in your resource group, right, you can see the name like how I passed it. Sorry, not here, under here. Now if you variable, right, you can see here in this is object, right, resource group. I'm passing the name and the ID together. This is an object, so this is why I have to use a curly braces that were passed it. Same way, this is a map of object. As I told you, even map of object also, mostly whenever you're working with a TFVers file, this is how it should be normally. After the name, this thing. The question is clear that whatever variable you're passing, let's say I'm passing very take you there. Let's say I'm just passing data type here. Let's talk example of this thing, right? Not this one. This is storage account. Storage account is what? It is a variable name, right? Same variable name, because as I told you, this actual value you have not passed it. The actual value you have passed it in your TFVers file. But then how Terraform will know this particular details to be updated in the right, maybe let's say name or maybe tiers, how they will get to know, right? Because there are two different data, you have to sync them together, right? How Terraform will understand that if I mention Terraform, whatever name TFVers, whatever name I mentioned, how Terraform will understand to update the correct name or correct value, how the Terraform will get to know, or maybe how they will check that, right? This is possible only with the help of variables name. That means within each resource you have you're passing some variable, right? So in my case, I'm passing the variable call as a storage account. That means this is about the storage account, whatever details I want to pass it, same based on the Terraform in your style module, whatever the value you have it, I mean the variables you have defined, same way you have to structure and pass the value in your TFVers file with the same variable name. It cannot be changed, different name. Okay. Now let me go here. If I go here, as I told you, storage account. If I search with the storage account, sorry, my bad. Okay. If I search the storage account, this is the name of the storage account, right? This is the name coming from where? This is under TFVers file. This is coming from where? This is coming from your variable file in your style module. Now this is a name I want to define, and this name you can give, this is just a mapping, actually map name, and this is actually storage account name. So even if you don't want to use this map, also we can remove this one I mean, not this one. If you don't want to use this name is equal to this name also, I can remove it. I can simply use this one as a storage account name also possible. But in this case, you need to understand little bit of the data structure in it. But let's for now, as I told you, this also there's nothing issue. But then while working in the Terraform, if you are removing this thing would be different way. That means you have to map the within your storage account. But now this is a map name. In my case, mapping time. So I will show you that also later. But let's not forget. I mean, think much about for now. Let's focus here. Now, whatever name I'm passing here, this is a name, tiers here, everything, and so on and so forth. Same thing. I have another storage account because, as I told you, it is a map, right? I can have another storage account properties, and you can have n number of storage properties. So based on the TFVers file, if you have mentioned 2 times storage account, that means storage account 1 and 2. That means 2 different storage account going to be created. That's if you want to create a 3 times, then 3 times you have to map it here. This is only when you are using something called as a map. Okay, as a data type using forest meta argument. We are using forest, right? For here, forest we are using, right? This time only this data structure will work. If you are having different requirement, then you have to structure your variable also in different way. Okay, but I'm showing this way because this is the normally company would prefer to use it because that has to be managed dynamically. They don't want to modify entire code. They want to simply update the Terraform TFR file and create new resources because it is mapped. I hope this is clear. Now coming to the point here, as I told you, this is the name you should be passed. So same way, I was referring to this one, right? Same way, if I have to, this is a root module main.tf, right? So I can pass the value of another folder called as environment. There I can pass, I can define. Now, if you notice here, I have defined the dev.auto.tf bars file, right? This is under your module itself. But yeah, if you have a multiple, this is a one way of doing it. But another way, as I told you, normally you will not define your TF. This all remains okay, but TF normally you will not be defining here. It has to be defined based on the structure of the basic infrastructure. There, this thing. It could be based on the environment or based on some applications. It could be anyways, right? So yeah. So what you can do, have separate folder created, and based on the environment, you change the value in the TF file. Let's say that means if I want to deploy to the dev environment, I will copy paste this thing, modify this thing. Same thing if I want to deploy to the production, I can copy paste everything. Only the name I can change it because as you know, right, for production would have a different name, for staging would be different name. So this is the reason I will simply modify, copy everything. Only the value I'll be changing for each environment. So it is as clear. I mean, it is much clear, right? So that's how it should be used. Okay, now let's go to the point that is a workspace. Now we have understood this point, what it says now. Now, yeah, Terraform CLI workspace are completely different from this. You can ignore now. There is another concept, Terraform cloud also, right? So we will not touch that for now. So let me take you directly here. This is the command where we need to understand the Terraform basically workspace command. There are some of the useful commands where we can basically use it. The first is Terraform workspace show. So we have already shown that one also. So then Terraform, this is basically to see the list. If you want to list all the Terraform workspace, that you can list it out. Or if you want to basically create new workspace, right? So that you can work on that. You can create using the new arguments. Same way for the, if you want to switch, once you create this thing, you want to switch to the particular workspace, right? So that you can work. So that we can set the select. Same way for the Terraform workspace, if you want to delete it, you can delete. These are some of the high level of Terraform workspace where we need to understand. So let's go with the first one. So as I told you, let me make my screen, I think it's clear. Now if I type here show, it is showing 1. If I show a list also, it will be showing as 1. Okay, just notice this one. Okay, it will show as was 1. Why it is showing? Because as I told you, we do not have multiple. So mean it will only show. This means it will list everything. Now let us create one workspace. This time, let's say I want to deploy my resources into dev environment. Say for example, I can simply type Terraform. I need to create first the workspace name, right? So I can simply get workspace. Then to create what is the name, I can go with the let's say new, right? If you just refer this thing, I can go with the new one. But let's say Hriyen, I know this is possible, but looks little normal for me. But what if you forget this command? How can I remember this thing? Because sometimes it's not, it is common for human, right? We may forget this command. So what is the best way? Just like a git, we can also have take the some command. So what we can do is we can simply type Terraform workspace. You simply type. Then you will get some help. Like what are the other possible value there I can basically use it. Let's say I want to create or maybe I want to delete. I don't remember the comments, right? So let me type here. So if I type Terraform workspace, that's it. What happens now? Terraform, this is a global options workspace. You can see new list, so everything we can do. That means now for this sub commands. If you want to delete, that means I can use a Terraform. Now you can see delete means you can see the name. If you want to delete means you have to use this argument. Delete, delete a workspace. If you want to delete a workspace like this, same thing. If you want to list the workspace means you can use a list argument. Same thing, create a new workspace. As I mentioned, you have to use a new. Same after creation, if I want to switch to the branch, select a workspace. That means you can select the select. Same thing for the show. What is it? Show the name of the current workspace. So this is much easier to remember also, right? So instead of just remembering the things, you can just remember the workspace and enter it. That's it. Then you can execute based on your requirement. So as I told you, now I have understood which command to run, right? In my case, I want to create new one, means I will select the new. That's it. But now I need to define, right? What is the name I want to create for? So I have to define the basically workspace name. I will give just a dev. Enter. What is now created and switch to the workspace that is a dev. Automatically they will create and switch it. Now now let's say if I simply type again show, sorry, not show, list basically. Now I can see here. Now just like in Git also, now also we can see the with the asterisk mark. Yeah, that means here we have workspace called default and the dev. I'm into dev now. Now let's say now how can I switch back to the stage? Let's say I want to work with the default one. How can I do? Again, as I told you, there's a command called select, right, to switch the workspace. So I can simply type workspace select, then mention the default, whatever name it is. You can copy paste also, or if you know, you can type it. Okay. Now it's switched. Now it is switched. You can switch to workspace this name, default name. Now, if I use a list, I can see I'm under this thing. Now, if I want to use the show commands, what show command does basically, it will show where you are actually, which branch, sorry, not branch, just like a git only, which workspace you are actually you are into. Now you can type show. Now, as I mentioned, I'm into the default workspace, so this is why I can see only the default. But if you want to list all the workspace, then you can select the list command. Okay, now let's switch. As I told you, we are going to work with a dev for this thing, right? Workspace. Then I can select dev, right? Because dev is created. I'm going to switch here. I have switched it. Now let me do one thing. I have switched it. What I can do here now, right? Now I can run the commands. Whatever Terraform I want to deploy. Let's say I want to. If you remember, just some time before we have a state file, everything, right? So now what is this? This is within your storage. If you go to the storage, right? Let me storage, I have it. You can see right the storage. You can just see this is a name, whatever we have. This is all common, right? Now let's run this Terraform, this thing. Um, Terraform. let's say plan. See, this manager is going to be created. So this is the thing. Now we can basically, let's say I want to apply it. I can mention as yes because I didn't mention as auto approve. Now you see, now this time it is going to be created into the another environment called as a dev environment. Why it is used? As I told you, if you see the this thing, if you want to test it out, if you don't want to grab this thing, right? You can see here something Terraform will not here, right? For example, development working on a complex this thing infrastructure changes might create a temporary workspace in order to freely experiment with changes without affecting the default workspace. So as I told you, this also possible if you want to deploy to the particular environment or we want to do some R&D kind of things. It is always good practice to have a separate workspace and work with that. Okay, or maybe if you want to manage for each environment as in separate workspace, so that you can manage your state file also separately. In this situation also you can use it. Let's wait some time. Okay, let's go on the next. Okay, next what we have, yeah. So if you want to delete it again, as I told you, we can actually delete it. Okay, it's got created. Now if I tag here Terraform, sorry, not Git, it is a Terraform. What is the command to check the state? List, right? I want to check that Terraform state list. Now whatever I have defined here, it is going to be used. Basically, this is your state file. I can check it. Now, if you go back, now you do not see the changes. You see, we do not see the changes if you see our last Terraform state file, right? This is the uh, this time. That means 1 hour before. But you can check the time now. So this is managed in separate workspace. So if you want to see, there is you can see, right, Terraform dot tfstate.d. You can see here. This is the new one state file. It is got created for you, right? It is not using the default as it is here. This is the default terraform.tf state file. Got updated like 1 hour ago. You can see the time now before. Now the new one is created with a new folder called directory called as terraform.tfc.d. Now if you go inside, we have a, this is the name that we have given here, right? Maybe let me show you this name, right? We are into dev environment, that is dev workspace basically. So this is the reason why you can see this name now, dev. If you go inside dev, this is where now you can manage your separate state file. This is what I was saying you, if you want to manage your state file separately for each environment so that they can manage easily, one way to use is using Terraform Workspace. Okay, but when comes to the one what I was explaining here is you will not manage your everything. Rather, we will have a separate folder or directory called as the environment. For example, within each one, I will have a like multiple environment defined. Let's say dev, staging, and production. For each one, I will have a Terraform.this. I'll change here. Instead of changing in Terraform like code level, or this thing I can do. So one way, that means now we understood, right, why we have to use a workspace. Workspace can be used in two scenario. First scenario, I would say, if you want to manage your state file individually for each environment, then you can use Workspace. Second reason, if you want to basically let's say execute some commands but you are not sure with the state file, because if you update something, let's say I'm doing some changes in the default workspace, right? What happens, something happen means if you run the commands, if you apply, what happen, Terraform will try to update the changes you make in your state file also, right? It is very this thing, right? So in the state file automatically Terraform will be updated your changes, right? If you do, let's say, some changes here. So to avoid this one, if you want to just do some R&D or you want to test it something, because I don't want the state file to be affected, right? So in this case, one good way is to use a Terraform workspace. Okay, so that is a thing. Third reason I can also give, if you want to, for each environment, if you want to just manage individual based on the workspace, that also you can do it. Okay, so if you open here, maybe it's not opening. Let me try to open with Notepad. Yeah, same thing. What no, like same as it is as normal, would have a same all the state file. This is about your dep related. So let's say instead of deploying your maybe trying into your productions or maybe particular this thing environment, then this is the best way of basically doing first and see if all works fine, then you can do it that. Then you can destroy the resource also. Now, let me give you a real-time example. Now, you understood, right? Now, um, let me give one real-time example so that it will be clear much. Resource is getting created, everything is okay. But what is the resource name? I think that is something target, something this name, right? This target name created, this also, I think this also, yeah. Within here only, because we are using data source. Now you can see two name. Two name is, of course, two name will be there because we have in the Terraform, we have two. Now you understood, this is created. Now that this by resource is created where? In dev environment now, right? It is a dev environment. Now, same resource, let me try to create with different name. It should not affect the existing resource now. Now that means let me switch to the default. What is the command? Terraform workspace select my bad default, right? That means I'm into the default. The default mean now I came to the default. Now let me change some name. Instead of target here, not this one. What can I change? Okay, maybe what I'll do, I have two storage account, right? Let me create only one instead of two. I will not create, let's say, okay, let me keep the default as this thing. Yeah, I will not create this one, let's say example. It should not affect anything which was already deployed. That means right now you can see two storage account. No? This should not affect, because let's say this particular resource belongs for the, let me just keep the resource group as it is. Let's not think much of the resource group. Let's talk about the resource we have within the resource group. That is, what do you say, that storage account. There are two storage account, but I want to create, this is for dev environment I have created, right? In the dev workspace. Now I want to create same resource, but this time, because as we all know, resource cannot be the same name, I will change it. But then Terraform should not ask me to destroy, or maybe it is already available. They should not tell that, because I'm modifying the same Terraform code, right? Only the difference is the workspace. The code I'm using same as it is. Otherwise, I will keep this also. for simplicity purpose, I'll keep this also. Let's say this time I'm putting a default workspace. I will simply change the name. Our focus is storage account. Okay, this maybe I can ignore for now. This also I can ignore this for now. Oh, this is used already by this thing. Okay, what our focus is, what we need to focus to deploy only to the default workspace. So this time I'll go to the tfbars file. Where is that tfbars? Let me check Terraform dot. Okay, that means I'm not passing the value directly to the this thing. That's okay. So what I'll do, I will directly change the here, right? This time I want to create as an object resource group, but this time I will change the resource group name something else, because this is for the default. I can give a default. This is what is a, remember the resource group name. Resource group name given as a default. Same thing, storage account also. I cannot use the same storage account name. I should change the storage account name as well, right? Because their same name will not be supporting. So I can give a something like a storage default. Rest tag that will be as it is. Okay, so that means what I'm doing now, I'm changing the resource group name as the my RG default, and this storage account name I'm giving as a default, storage default. That means by default, if you don't have the concept called the workspace, what Terraform will do, Terraform will check the state file now. First, let me validate. What is the problem? By the issues here. Now, if I try to apply it, okay, let me directly apply because I don't want to do plan and all. Okay, auto approve. One thing, what you notice here, by default, if you're trying to run and modify your this thing, Terraform will throw an error. It is going to be recreated, right? It is going to be recreated according to the changes that you're making. But this time, nothing is going to recreate here, because as I told you, this is a separate workspace, isolated workspace. It is not going to recreate because this will be managed as a separate state file. Default that means now the state file will be used, not this one. Check the time. It is a 6:12, right? If you see the last now for the default workspace, this thing, you can check now 4:23. What is the time now? 4:23, right? So that means for each environment would have a sub or workspace would have a separate state file managed. Right now, this is the reason why now it is not showing me any error. Rather, it is going to create a resource because in this particular workspace, there is issue with the naming something. CID, let me read the error. See the place. Resource ID subscriptions. What is the resource storage account? Oh, there is a one more storage account. This name need to be changed. As I told you, storage account cannot be same name or any resource. It should be managed, right? This is why they are telling to manage it using Terraform. You can see here, right? To be managed. So there is something called a target resource. There are two resource group. Storage account. I need to change them. One I have already changed it, right? This name, yeah, this name. There are two storage account. Yeah, this one, because this with this name I have already created. Right? I can just show you. This is created with another environment, so I cannot use the same name, right? Of course. So if I search it, this name, right? target. So this is already created, so I cannot be using the same name. So rather they're telling to manage it. So I don't want to manage it. I want to create a different name for this particular default environment. So I can give something like I can here, let's say default 10. Let's say this is about a default related. Okay, now let me apply. Okay, now that is how target. I think this time also I will not create. I don't need this one. That means only focusing on the storage account. Okay, and the one resource group with name, whatever name I given. I think I given my RZ, right? That will be created. That means two storage account. What happened? That means two storage account, one resource group will be created because I have commented one resource. This one, this will be not created, right? So one already created, the two going to be created now. So let's wait. If you want, you can see the what is going to be created or what is going to be destroyed. Not destroyed, basically update it. So if you see here, update in place, this particular my RG with my default name I given, right? This is going to be updated with the new name. This got created already, right? This got already created before while Terraform plan just now apply, I mean. So it is going to be updated. The reason why it is showing the changes is because of this thing, tags. This tag is coming from your default. Okay, so this is you can ignore this now. But if you still want to know how this also works, I can show you how I have defined it. That means I want to say that if for any time whenever resource is created, there should be a default tag where it has to be added to the resource. So there is Azure policy. There is just let's wait. Yeah. So role policy, you can go assignment because it was assigned. Just mention tag. Now there is an option called appends a tag and its value to resource group. So this is a resource group, right? If you see a resource group for any resource, it could be. So I want tag to be enabled by default with default tag. So this is the reason why it is coming. Now if you go here, you can see what is a tag name, environment, and the productions, right? This is the name I had defined. Environment and production. This is coming from your policy, but it's good if you understand environment and the production. Okay, so you can ignore this thing because this is doing from the policy. I have defined the policy tag. Now, next, what is going to create one storage account? As I told you, it is going to be only create one storage account with the name called. Where is the storage account name? Let me see. Can you see storage account name here or maybe below? Here. This name, Pulse. Maybe I didn't update the name. Two storage account. Okay, target. Yeah, I did it one. Okay, let me remove one storage account because I have to check the storage account. One is created with this name. One is created with the Pulse and target, right? So I should be different name, Pulse and target. Okay, let me check. Pulse. Okay, I should be naming this one. Let's say default. The default. Okay, default. One is a default name. So another one default 10. Now it's okay. Now two storage account going to be created because I change the name. So I hope this is clear, team, how it works the workspace. So if you want to do a lot of, let's say, research, or you want to basically see your code how it works instead of running in your default workspace, try to create separate workspace and run your Terraform code so that it will not affect to your existing state file. Now let's wait. Okay, meanwhile, I'll take you here. So as I told you, these two ratios nothing going to be done anything. It will be as it is. They will not touch anything. Rather, because we have used the same resource group, right, for another default workspace also. So here you will have a two more storage account created. Now you can see the three name came, still creating, right? As I told you, there will be one more created because we have two environment, right? Default and the dev environment. So for each environment, we are deploying two storage account with unique name. So there will be another with this name 10. So one is getting created, another is going to create in some time. Okay, team. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please you can raise your questions. Maybe it'll take at least a minute. Let's refresh it once again. All right. Now, as I mentioned, you will have four storage account created, right? Four storage account going to be created with whatever name you define default. We define these two from the default workspace, and these two are from the dev environment, from dev workspace. So now you can manage individually uh, resource, right? Individual resource. In the sense, based on the environment, you can manage it now. Now let's say this is got created. Now, if you want to delete the existing resource from here, before that, let me show you the state file. As I told you, we are in a state file, default state. So in default, now you can see the time now. It is 4:32. It is a 4:32 right now. But if you go inside there, this is a dev related, right? The state file you can see 4:10, 12. That means you can see, right, how the state file are managed. This is managed everything independently. So you should not be worried much about state file. But something happened to the state file. This is the reason why we want to basically isolate the environment and do a test properly. Then we have to deploy to the respective environment in Terraform, right? It can be many situations, as I mentioned. You can just now let me delete uh, the first, that is from the dev environment. So now I cannot delete from here. I have to go switch back to that first. So to switch back, I can simply select the dev because I'm into the default now. It is going to be dev. You can check now if you want to check maybe workspace. I can use a show command. So it would help you to basically see where you are standing in this workspace, right? So as I told you, I'm into the dev environment now. So in dev case, in now it is going to be related these two resources, like accept default, right? Accept these two. This below two would be created. I mean, they'll destroy now. Let us see how we can destroy. Or if you want to modify that, you can do the same as it is, right? Terraform apply, sorry, destroy. Auto approve. Okay, let's where now you can see. If you just notice here also, you can they're reading this thing and then so on, right? But this time If you remember, we have a data, we have a storage account, right? Sorry, resource group, this one. This will not be destroyed, right? Because as I told you, if everything is deleted also, this will not be destroyed because it is we are using use data source. So this is not managed using Terraform. So other resource, whatever you have, it is going to be destroyed. So let's see. Now you can see 4 got destroyed. Now if you refresh it, now let me refresh the page. Now you see those, as I told you, we are in the dev this thing, right? So it is basically destroying the um, only dev related. Right now we are not this default. This is not getting deleted. Even the data, your like resource group, still I could see because this is not managed using your data source. I mean through Terraform, right? We have this thing. So that is how we can also manage it. So we can basically have separate workspace and for each environment and manage it. Only the name you can change it. That is the way why I was explaining here. We can define the separate state file. If you don't want to do and show in the just complex configurations and all, you can also do something like this. But this means separate state file. Here also would be separate state file for your this thing will be created. But you, this here mean you can manage this one individual listing. Okay, this is the difference between different way of working with workspace. Same thing, I will destroy the existing also. Let me switch back. I think what is the default? I can run this command now. Okay, that's all for today, team. So let's wind up the session here. Thank you once again for joining us. See you in the next session.